Well, Federal Fremantle includes the Port of Fremantle, which is behind us. It's Western Australia's principal cargo port. It also includes the Australian Marine Complex, a little bit further to the south, which is one of two shipbuilding hubs in Australia, certainly one of two defence shipbuilding hubs. It has the capacity to have a large share in the future defence shipbuilding program. I don't think it's getting enough of a share of it as it stands. That's one of the things I'm advocating for. Of course, it sits on Cockburn Sound, and as part of Cockburn Sound you have HMAS Stirling, Fleet Base West, which is really in the electorate to the immediate south, but it all forms part of a set of infrastructure and sort of operational activity that is critical in Western Australia, but part of what Kim Beazley helped to establish, the sort of the two oceans setup of Australia's defence capability, and that is going to be more and more important because of what's going on in the Indian Ocean for our own interests, and I guess because of the activities of some other key players like China, like India and Indonesia. Well, I think if you're involved in the National Parliament, you have to take an interest in defence. It's one of the key responsibilities of the national government. I represent an electorate in Fremantle that has a strong historical involvement in defence and a strong existing involvement in defence, particularly around naval shipbuilding at the Australian Marine Complex, but also in the way that defence procurement sort of relates to other aspects of Australian industry participation and our engagement in the region. Now, they're all interests of mine, so it's a conversation I'm very happy to be part of. It starts at the kind of the grassroots level. I work directly with businesses and organisations in my electorate that have an interest in being part of defence industry work. That can include large primes like Austal and Civmec, but then the full range, the full ecosystem of smaller and medium organisations, and I deal with them individually. I deal with them through industry associations like the Henderson Alliance, and I'm conscious that defence pursues certain projects and certain kinds of capability development in a pure way, but that actually relates out or connects out more broadly into other areas. So one of the things that a lot of people might not know about is you have here Carnegie Wave Power, which is developing very, very innovative wave power and off-grid technology. Now, they entered into a power purchase agreement with HMAS Stirling, which has benefits both ways. I also know the importance of sort of defence capability in the patrol boat space in relation to managing fisheries and ocean conservation. We have the third largest exclusive economic zone in the world. We exist in a region where there are a lot of underdeveloped nations that don't have the capacity to manage and protect their fisheries at a time in which we're seeing sort of industrial factory fishing trying to spread into some of these underdeveloped areas. So the Pacific Patrol Boat project, I think, has great potential in the Pacific, and perhaps we need to think about an Indian Ocean Patrol Boat program to do the same in the Indian Ocean. The fundamental point of difference is the geographical orientation. We've also had a sort of a strength in naval operations. We've been home to the submarines. I think that will continue to be the case. We probably, in my view, could get stronger in the other services. There's the ability to kind of project and operate into the Indian Ocean side of the Indo-Pacific, really relies on some of that capability growing, and I'd like to see that properly considered. I don't think we want to fall into a default position which just sees Western Australia assigned kind of the crumbs from the table, or the sort of minimal participation or minimal presence and capacity, which is the current state. I think those things should be on the table. I'm not saying that you make radical change or you make change overnight, but we need to, as Kim Beazley helped achieve a significant shift, that shouldn't be the end of it. There should be ongoing consideration of how Western Australia acts as the sort of the tip of the spear, or the sort of sharp edge of our projection and operations in the Indian Ocean. Well, I'm glad that it's become a prominent part of the conversation. That's the first thing. I'm glad that people are talking about it, and that it's getting a larger presence in the sort of the public mind. It needs to be. We've got to remember in Western Australia that we are a long way away from the gravitational centre of Australian decision making, and as a result there will always be this natural tendency for our part in any area of Australian life to be overlooked and sometimes under par. And I think we certainly see that in defence. Shipbuilding is the clearest example. $90 billion funding envelope for the future shipbuilding capacity. We're getting $3.5 billion. We're getting 3 or 4% of that when we are 11% of the population, and really we are half of the continent. Well, the great thing about the report is it really presents the circumstances as they are and the potential for things to change. I think if you've been interested in defence in WA, you've had a sort of an understanding or a suspicion about how things sit. Well, the report lays that out plainly for ourselves, for advocates in the West, to do a better job of telling that story. But I think it's also been a little bit of a wake-up call for people in the East who may not quite have understood how things are in the West and the potential for them to change. So I think that's been its prime value. In addition to laying out all of the evidence and all of the data, it looks at a series of recommendations broken down by areas of responsibility and levels of government. And I think some of them are very practical suggestions, and they should be given due consideration. Partly, you start at the top level. It shows intent. It shows recognition of the importance of the Indian Ocean. I mean, if you end up with a patrol boat program that's called the Pacific Patrol Boat Program, that betrays a kind of a tendency to focus on that side of our region. I think that it was a good program, and I think to the extent that its value is proved, then the next logical step is to consider how you might extend that into the other part of the Indo-Pacific. As I've said, with that kind of program, when you're talking about patrol boats as a class of defence asset, you've got to remember that it has multiple benefits. It has humanitarian benefits, it has surveillance benefits, it has relationship building benefits, it has fisheries management benefits, it has a whole range of things, and it should also be looked at through the lens we're now taking of a sort of a rolling shipbuilding program that is first of all about sovereign self-sufficiency in the way we interact with our region, but is also about building export capacity. That's been one of the biggest missing parts of defence procurement in Australia. For the scale of our investment, we are way, way, way down when it comes to our sort of export performance. The government is coming to that party pretty late. It's a bit disappointing to see them sort of throw money at what sounds like a sales team, when I think most people would know you start with the product. You've got to have the right product, you've got to have the right capability, and then of course you start looking at how you can sell that into the world and get people to see the value of our sort of shipbuilding quality.